Okay, this story starts about 45 years ago. Wife and I and the family moved to Seattle. We started working in downtown Seattle, 3rd Avenue for Pacific Northwest Bell, and it wasn't long before I hated the job, and much shorter than that, I hated the area. And through some luck and a phone call, I was able to get on at this location here, which is called ComSec, which is located about 4 miles north of Brewster, up on Brewster Flats. This is one of the 2 Earth stations that were in existence in those days that provided communications to South Pacific, Australia, Japan, even Antarctica. And there was some pretty hot traffic that would go through there occasionally. In fact, during the time of the astronauts, when we ran circles with the astronauts service through there, we went under a code we call Blue Law. Don't touch anything. The work there was not heavy. We had 3 shifts, 8-hour shifts. I worked the swing shift from 4 till midnight, and we had about 3 hours of routine work to do, and the rest of the time was reading a book, watching TV, or just keeping busy. Well, it turned out I wound up in a nest of hams also. There was Brian, WA7GWM, Greg, WA7TSP, and Walt, WB7SHN. Well, one day Walt approached me and says, "Hey, Don, why don't we build a 2-meter repeater for the Okanagan Valley?" Well, you cannot have picked 2 guys that are less qualified to do something like that, but we had 2 things in our favor, adrenaline and eager. And Walt said, "I can build the controller. Can you put together the RF side of the house?" Well, I had just recently, the last couple of years, put together a homemade 8-channel all-solid-state rig, and I bought kits from a company called VHF Engineering. They made VHF receivers and transmitters, and the receivers were actually pretty hot. And so off the inside of the receiver, that's the receiver board that I had. And of course, they also had the optional multi-channel board. Those are crystals that determine the frequency. And so I bought a board and put it inside of this control module, that's a plug-in module. I'll show you where it goes. And I built a transmitter, put it into another module. And I even built a 450 receiver. At those times, the FCC required that for controlling your repeater, you had to have an alternative mode of controlling your repeater other than the input frequency on 2 meters. I built the transmitter, which was at my house. This went up on the hill. And Walt built the controller. Now this may look kludgy, but this is what they used to call pegboard, point-to-point wiring. When you design a circuit, you're not sure it's going to work. You don't want to go through all the problems of etching a circuit board, make it look nice, find out, oops, I missed something. So you make it like this to make sure it works. And then you go back and you design a nice fancy looking board. So that transmitter, a little transmitter, put out a grand total of like maybe a watt or watt and a half. So I had a little amplifier that I had made when I worked for a company called Fairchild Semiconductor. I even worked in what they call the high power RF transmitter section. And guess what? One of my projects, my engineer says, "Don, I'd like to have you check these 2 transistors, put them in this circuit, then you can have them afterwards." So this was the real. I couldn't beat it. So this gave us about 10 to 15 watts out. And this is what the repeater looked like. The left side were the receivers, the right side was the transmitter. The controller and the ID unit was in the middle. I built this panel board, and this was a shelf that was abandoned by the phone company. It was a video processing shelf, which they just abandoned, so I glommed onto it. There's a little closer picture of it. There's the back with a lot of point-to-point wiring. And we built a 440 control antenna, one for my end of the house, one for my end, and one up on the hill. And we got it running. We burned it in at my house over the winter time using a 2-antenna configuration. And this will work for low power by adjusting the distances between the 2. You can find a null. I think the top one was the receiver, the bottom was the transmitter. But we couldn't go on a mountaintop with this because it wouldn't last any time in that kind of weather. So you needed a piece of equipment called a duplexer. Well, This is a low-budget operation, and duplexes were way out of our range. Until Walt saw something on the magazine or something for $100, and he purchased it and put it together. This is a copper-clad 6-cavity duplexer. The darn thing worked. Holy smokes. So with that in mind, and by the way, this repeater had been working maybe between Omak and Okanagan, and have a range of maybe a mile and a half from my house. So one nice sunny day, Walt and I, and another hand, I'm trying to think of his name, he had the 4-wheel drive pickup, so he was very important. We snuck it up on the hill, and we didn't tell a soul about it, because we didn't know whether we could get the thing running or not. So it was going to be a surprise to all of us. And in fact, the antenna was a mag mount, 5/8 mag mount, which we clamped on the top of a corrugated roof. That was our first antenna. Got to mention this is low budget. And then we crept down the hill, and we just started listening. Somebody chunked it. Holy smoke, somebody in Moloch could hear it. Before long, somebody in Brewster was hearing it. There was somebody in Canada. What's going on? We had more fun. That thing had darn near a 100-mile radius. I mean, we're looking at 6,000 feet on Mac Mountain. And that thing had a heck of a range of only like 10 or 15 watts. In fact, I think my record there was working Hermiston, Oregon with a handheld through the repeater. So we had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about repeaters and about what they can do. Oh, and I wanted to mention that the frequency that we were assigned, Doug Ryder, Ken's predecessor, assigned us the frequency of 146.970. Ken, would you assign that frequency anymore? 970?
I don't know. I have to look.
You can't. Back in about 1980, the hams were putting frequencies wherever they could put them in. And it was not a good, efficient use of the 2-meter band. So there was a repeater quorum that came together, maybe under the auspices of ARRL, says, look, we need to channelize the 2-meter band. So they separated it into 20 kc spectrums and using the even channels. So 146.90, 92, 94, 96, 98. That's what we were, 97. We were between there. And Walt and I wanted to change, and Frank, the Weeva 7 ZEV, said, no, they're not going to do that. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. So it didn't get done. We could have moved up or down 10 kc and we'd have been fine. Well, I get to know some interesting people while working there. I was working to midnight. I get off work at midnight and head home. Dark, roads like 20-some miles. I had to just key up and identify, and he would come back, Howard, K7HSM at midnight. And every night he'd talk me home until I got into my driveway. Howard now is a silent key. He passed away about 2 years ago, K7HSM, and he lived in Twisp. And then there was a few characters I got to know. Buck Buchanan, W7GSN, grouchy, sour, and nasty. And Bud Hubbard, WB7TFM, trouble from Moloch. Those calls fitted those guys. And then Frank Cotton, an ex-truck driver with a voice that could shatter glass, and he had a language problem. When he got on the air, I was like this with my controller ready to shut down the repeater. Luckily, he never did that over the air. But what Buck and Bud did, I was sorry that I ever put the repeater up on the hill. They'd get on their repeater and they'd start arguing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Oh, golly, why did I do this? And they'd get other people on the air to do the same thing. Oh my gosh. I found out years later, this was a setup. They were best friends. They'd pick a subject and they'd take the opposite side to get other people talking. Then they'd get off and go talk on the telephone and laugh about it. Anyway, a repeater drew people out of the woodworks. A ham that I never knew existed. That's what a repeater did. Well, I'm going to fast forward now a few years to November of 1983. My job at ComSat went away. There was no 2-meter activity here in the valley. Closest one was Mission Range 146.90, and you had to have pretty good power to get out of this valley to work it. It had a range. I mean, people in Seattle could work it if they bounced off of Mount Rainier. You could talk to Spokane to Seattle. It had a heck of a range. But one day, I got a call from this gentleman, Bruce Kerr, W7BYG. Now, there is a CW man. He would bring bundles of QSL cards from places that he had worked. I didn't even know where they were. And he'd worked it. And he was calling all the hams together. And back then, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have dial-up till about 1995. He was using this. This was the telephone directory for hams back in those days. So he went through this thing, picking out calls of guys that were in this valley. So he went to an awful lot of effort to do that. So we met at a restaurant called Sand and Surf Restaurant. It was at the corner of the stoplight corner. Now it's the Union 76 station. And that was where I met another few hams. Of course, I met Bruce, W7BYG, and a good friend of mine, Carlton Brownie, K7SMH. And I met somebody called Jerry, K7ABJ. He owned the radio station. So, Jerry, you were at the very start of this thing. If you could think of anything that I forgot, let me know. Were you there too, Steve?
Yeah.
I didn't remember that. Okay. Your call was not SSM. What was your call then?
I wasn't a ham then.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure when it was, but at one of these meetings at Sand and Surf, somebody said, hey, let's build a repeater. Or let's get a repeater and put it in so we can have coverage in the Chelan Valley. Well, first question was, where do we put it? Well, this guy says, I know where to put it. Let's put it in my building up on Chelan Butte. Great. Okay, where are we going to get a repeater? Did I mention this is a low-budget operation? I had a friend up in Omak that worked for Central Communication. It's now called Day Wireless. Randy, N7EBB. He contacted me one time and said, Don, that old repeater that you built, they replaced it with a commercial repeater, and your repeater is available. All right, we got a repeater. I don't know whether I was at that club meeting that night or not, but I found out that I was now the trustee of the Chelan repeater. With what I went through with the Okanagan OMAC, I didn't think I'd volunteer for that, but here I was, a trustee of the Chelan repeater. So, with the help of Brownie, K7SMH, Bob Soth, KG7RM, and several others, we bought a repeater down. What is this? Oh, did I mention that first winter we put that repeater on Omak Mountain? It worked great throughout the summertime. However, when the wintertime came, it had a problem. The components all drifted off frequency. We were shut down the whole winter. And not to be thwarted, we came up with a solution. We built an insulated box, and we put heat in it and a thermostat. You can't believe it. Did I mention this is a low-budget operation? It kept the temperature inside within 10 degrees. They worked great. Kludgy. In fact, old Brownie built a second box up there. But we lit the repeater in the box. We did that for several years. And we started putting antennas up. That's old Brownie there to your left. Bob Soth to the right. Both those guys were big helpers, and there were others, but I only have pictures of a few. That's Bob putting the antenna. We side mounted it off of the tower that was on top of the storage shed. That's Bob making final adjustments. And our observers. Well, we soon learned that Chelan Butte was an RF jungle. We started getting interference right off the bat. And I learned that there were two paging services that were 600 kc apart. Guess what? Repeater's transmit frequency and receiver frequency are 600 kc apart. When both of those paging services were up, they mixed. You can't filter that out. We'd be operating on them, all kinds of noise. But we persisted. We'd live with that for a while. In fact, Bruce Kerr even did some public service. There was a bicycle organization that used to bicycle from coast to coast. They would leave Seattle, come over Stevens Pass, up through Chelan, up through where the repeater is, McNeil Canyon, and they coordinated through 2 meters. And Bruce helped out with the coordination In fact, one time he had to make some phone calls because of the driving rainstorm, and they were able to stay in the old community gym overnight. So, and Bruce came up with the idea, let's start a 2-meter net on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. All right. Bruce and I did net control for years on that repeater. And in fact, Bruce even started CW practice on that repeater before the net. But one day things changed. I got a call from you, Steve, and I remember the exact words. The DNR's up here on the hill, and they've gone ballistic. They want to talk to you right now. Oh, shoot. What did I do now? What's a DNR, by the way? I learned that even though I had permission to be in Jerry's building, I did not have permission from him to be on the mountain. I needed to sign contracts and met with their requirements with all kinds of filters and ice leaders. They were going to fine me and do everything but incarcerate me, but till I begged forgiveness and said, okay, we're going to remove it. We're going to leave the hillside. So, oh, by the way, this is for Shane. This is what our telephone installation looked like back in 1983. So we went looking for another site. There were different suggestions. So old Brownie and myself, I put out information to hams in the area to be listening on the repeater's output frequency because we were going to be doing some propagation study. So we tried Slide Ridge, other than clobbering the cable TV. The coverage wasn't all that great. I mean, it was even hard getting into Brewster from the Slide Ridge. But Jerry says, well, if you can get yourself into here, I've got this hut. And it's a little tight, but if you can get yourself in there, you're welcome to do this. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Brad and I did some propagation tests from there, and hey, we can contact Brewster. We can copy in Wenatchee, Okanagan, Omak. Then I got this call from somebody at Perigin Lake. Oh, that's outside of Winthrop. We picked up the Meadow Valley from there. In fact, Steve even worked from Stehegan into this. Good signal. Yeah. Barn burner for insulation, a lot better than Chelan Butte was. So we went to work to try to clean it up a bit, get our stuff ready. That's old Brownie, I think, driving in a ground rod, and that's Al Hubbard Jr. there. His dad was quite an individual. There's old Brown and Al again. Getting ready to put up the antenna. And let's see. Here was our Iwo Jima Mount Suribachi equivalent. Tell me that wasn't staged. And we got a little advertisement from that. We made the local newspaper. The hams are happy. 147-100 is back on the air. August 1983. We're back on the air. Now here's a mystery. Maybe, Steve, you can answer this question. Bob Soth, KG7RM, was at a Forest Service surplus auction. He bought a duplexer from the Forest Service, and he brought it down to me one time. He said, Don, can the club use this? Well, yeah, sure. So I took it up to Omak again, to my old friend Randy with Central Communication. He said, Don, yeah, that's a duplexer, but that is a strange configuration. I think they call it a ring configuration. I don't know how to tune this thing up. You better send it down to Sinclair in the Bay Area and have them modify this thing. So that's it, coming back in the back of Roger's truck. That's about the time Roger joined us in our group. Now my question is, what we were using for our duplexer before we got this thing? I don't know. That copper-clad duplexer did not work out too well. But here it is, installed with our box inside of the repeater. I'm not sure what repeater this is. Is that a 440 repeater? Is that Jerry's? Is that the one he used?
I believe that probably is a 440 repeater.
Yeah,
It was up on the field for a while.
Yeah, is that the one that's
They put the
now?
wooden pole up there with the antenna up on top.
Yeah, is that what's up on now on Union Valley?
That's up there at the water tank.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, we had 440 from there for a while.
SR 2000.
Okay, all right. There's the duplexer installed and the repeater behind it. had an inline bird watt meter to make sure we're getting good power out. I think we were putting out a smoking 22 watts at that time, but good location. It worked out fairly well. And it started to see a lot of activity. I was very happy with that. Roger actually put out a few club newsletters. That's one of the ones that he put out. We even put battery backup into that thing so that if we lost commercial power, which happened often up there, this thing would switch to battery backup. And from the original controller, it had the capability to tell us when we were on battery or on commercial power. If we were on commercial power, we get the single beep tone. We were on battery, we get a beep beep. And I think you used it quite a bit, Steve, for troubleshooting. When your site went off the air, you go out there and kerchunk there, Peter. Here's one of our last club meetings. We met at the Sand and Surf until it shut down. We met up at the Apple Cup a few times. We met at a place, a little restaurant called The Crockery, which was across the street from the post office, which is now the new bank. And this is the senior center, the old senior center. And there's JM and his wife, and Roger and his wife, and Peter Stutz on the far left with his white shirt. He's the one that built that quad 2-meter antenna that I'm trying to get rid of. We were there for a long time. And then we were approached in 1994 by a organization that wanted to put on a hang gliding competition. 1994, the world's champion ladies hang gliding competition was held on Chelan Butte, and it got a lot of publicity. And in fact, the county even went up and improved the road for us. It's going to be that high of visibility. We had ESPN and network news going up there to take pictures of that. And with all the traffic, Roger and I did traffic control. We had allowed traffic to go up. And we were flaggers. And other operators were doing down pilot recovery. And one of my friends actually was in the finish line project, where as soon as they found out where the finish line was, they headed for that so that they'd be there to time them back to Bob Sewell's KG7RM. They drove one time to Reardon at 70 miles an hour, be able to get there before the hang gliders showed up. Some of these hang gliders could get out and move. And it was such a big event, it went on for a week. We did not have the club manpower to help, so we had to draw from the Okanagan and the Wenatchee Club to fill in and help. So I had a whole list of hams and days that they would work and things like that. So it was a very big operation. And that's the newspaper. And we had kind of a command post up there on top of the hill. When this hang gliding episode was over, within a couple of months, we had another event that required the hams. It's called the Tyee Fire. August of 1977, a lightning strike up the Aniak Valley at Tyee Creek. It smoldered there for like 10 days till the wind came up, and then there was no stopping. It was heading straight for Chelan. We had engine fire trucks, I bet there was 100 of them in the Chelan Valley, parked all over the area to do structure protection. And you know what? Not a one of those fire companies had a common repeater frequency that they could talk to. So guess what? Hams that had handhelds, set them on 146.52. You go here, you go here, you go here. We have to coordinate the fire department. That's just crazy. And again, this went on for, 10 days to 2 weeks. We had ash flowing, coming down in the valley, and we just got exhausted. We couldn't get help from the west side because there was fires around Leavenworth. Stevens Pass was shut down. We couldn't get across Blewett Pass. The fires there, it was shut down. Finally, we got an organization, either the Aries or Races came up through the North Cascades Highway to relieve us. We were burned out. We were also taking care of the first aid station at high school. And we were exhausted till they finally got over there to relieve us. So quite an experience. Steve, you and Jerry were awesome as far as coverage. The network came to you guys because you have better coverage than anybody else. The story I think you told me one time about old Dave Hale up the valley, one of those reporters was saying, this fire is going to destroy Lake Chelan for 100 years. Oh, David, all this happened in 1927. It'll get better. Right on the year. Blew that reporter away. Anyway, after this, yeah, we had other events that our hams did not participate in because 2 meters was getting a little more popular and handhelds. And we told them, if you're licensed, you can use a repeater. That's fine. We started getting some strange calls. And one day I got a call from Jerry Saban, W7UVI, up in Twitches. Don, I looked up a couple of these calls, and some of these pilots are awfully old. They were born in like 1920. Okay, so I contacted their head honchos. Look, knock this off. Licensed hams okay, but non-licensed ham, no. Well, it didn't stop, so what we started doing, just before the flight started, we shut the repeater down. We didn't turn it back on until they were through. We had to police ourselves. Our first field day, and I think that's you, Steve, up on top of your ladder truck.
Yeah, that's one of our old ladder trucks from Sun Cable TV.
Yeah.
System I used to
Yeah. This was quite an event. Well, Roger was a bus driver for the Manson School District. His wife was a school teacher, so they got to add ends for the Manson District. And here's putting an antenna up on the field on one of the goalposts. And we conned Bruce Kerr into helping out with the field day. He had never done a field day. So he put his motorhome in there, all set up. We put an antenna up there. He had a ball working CWs, really plush. Here we were out in tents, and he had his nice motorhome. In fact, we kidded him about having a battery-powered pencil sharpener. He was that really roughing it, Steve. Really good humor. And there's Tim Young. He did the digital. I think it was Packet back in those days. And that young man to his left is one of the Peterson boys, either the owner of the Apple Cup or his brother. So, this young boy's grandfather was a ham, and he wanted to talk to his grandpa on ham radio, and unfortunately it never happened. And this is Sandy. I first met Sandy. He was a station manager at ComSat when I was there. He lived in Pateros still. Really neat guy. Pretty sharp on electronics too. And we made the newspaper. There's one of our nighttime.
Who was the guy in the picture? Go back one.
Oh boy.
Is that the guy that works at Kelly's?
No. KG7OY. He's now a silent key.
Got a good hat.
Yeah. Not Chief Joe Dam, but the dam just north of here.
Wells, the guy on the left.
Wells Dam.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Bill Toonstra.
Okay.
Bill Toonstra, yeah. He developed Alzheimer's and he passed away. Yeah. That's sad. Really neat guy. Anyway, this is Nights, one of the club meetings, one of the, and this is up at Union Valley. This is at JM's old place. This is another site up north out of Manson, up on one of the hills. And we tried to help Cozy whenever we could, since we couldn't help them financially. Whenever they had projects, we tried to provide helping hand where we couldn't. This is a major project where you guys took down that big steel tower and replaced it with utility poles. And that's you, Steve, in the back row. I was able to get a utility pole for the hams. They're just laying up there. I don't know who talked them into it. I don't think I talked to them. But they actually, this is Chelan County PUD up on Douglas County side. They set that pole first that our antenna's on. They trenched an area between the building and the pole and laid conduit in there.
I think the PUD charged us $100 for the whole thing. But that was very typical of them.
What a gift.
They had to put something on the books, but they really wanted to give it to us.
It was a gift, more what they did for the hams. Okay, here going down the pole. This particular set was what they call a quarter wave grounded stub. It's for lightning protection. And somebody could give a talk on transmission line theory, explaining how that works. Anyway, Tim Young and a couple more hams, they decided to help the side of the club, help the side of that site one of them had came up with a lot of siding that they'd used on their house. And so they tried sealing it up, putting siding on it to keep some of the critters out. And this is what it looked like. At least that's 20 years ago. Ken, I don't know what it looks like today. I haven't been up there since. But another thing that we did, which we didn't know that it was going to work, you remember the early pictures, all the dirt, all the dead grass around that? We saw that that could be a potential real fire hazard. We couldn't afford the expensive stuff like Castron, but I remembered from history one time the Romans back in the 12th century had a problem with another country that did a lot of was big into agriculture. So they plowed salt into the soil, just destroyed the area. So rock salt at Safeway was like $3 for a 30-pound bag. Every time we went up there on the hill, we'd start sprinkling salt around it. Look at where the grass is now. We sterilized that ground. And I think about 5 years ago, there's a fire that went up there, and that stopped it. We had a lot of fun. Roger came up with crazy things like we had a worked all Lake Chelan contest, and you keep score of ham that you worked in the Chelan Valley. Each one after was out, Brewster was out, you had to work Chelan County. This one friend of mine, Doug Berry from Electric City, he said I couldn't contact anyone. So I made up a special skunk award. And then we never had a name. We called ourselves the Radio Club or the Chelan Club for years and years and years. And it wasn't until Roger showed up one time with this design about 1998. All of a sudden, we have a name, Lake Chelan Radio Club. That's what we were called then. But, in the late 1990s, I saw our club start to fade. I think a lot of it was because of cell phones. People liked having an alternative means of communication. And ham radio was great, but cell phone was a lot easier. We saw the activity just slump. We even gave classes. Roger gave classes and I helped him out. And I think we graduated like maybe 24. And Kenny, I think you're about the only one that is a survivor of that group, and that's your brothers were at that club. Wow. And here I am giving another talk at the senior center. We have to have technical discussions there. Pretty high class. Other activities, we would have combined club activities. This is the Forest Service campground on top of Loop Loop Pass. Nice place to go when it's really hot down in the valley. We would go up there and meet some of the Okanagan Key Club, Bill Fisher, W7DJQ, and if you remember old Howard, K7HSM, that's Howard. Another picture of Howard. Then one day, about 2 years ago, I get a call from Ken, K7YR, and hey Don, let's have a breakfast at the Company Creek Pizza. The date was September the 4th, 2021. And as somebody once said, and now you know the rest of the story. Okay, any questions?
That was great.
Thank you.